business, you hate to, if I've got a laundry list for somebody of things to do that day, you hate to pound them with it after they open the line of communication. When that door opens, you're like, okay, I've been waiting 2 hours to talk to you about this, and we're 10 minutes from some of these things coming due. And so it just kind of made it awkward at times, but I love Buddy Bell, the person, who he was as a person and how hard he tried. Guy got dealt a few bad hands with, the clubs that he managed. I'm not sure he was anywhere near the manager that the records showed, because I saw a guy who could relate and talk to these guys because he was one of them. He played the game, and he played the game at a high level for a long time. I knew Buddy Bell, the player, never knew him as a person then, but I watched him as a player coming up, and you knew he knew something about baseball, especially with the family history there.
Then Dayton makes a different kind of move. He goes in a different direction, takes a little offbeat approach, and taking a manager who had worked in the Japanese League, and Trey Hillman. How about that relationship?
The thing about Trey, and I'll say this, it probably fits just about anybody who gets a managerial job, but it's kind of too bad that he didn't get a chance with better players. It's hard to come in and take over a team that has lost a lot and was still losing, and the roster was ever fluid. I mean, there were days you'd come in and you're not sure who's going to be in that clubhouse that day, because that's how fluid the roster was. It had a mix of veterans. I mean, guys who had some years on them, who were just playing, the back nine, as we say, and then some youngsters that we were picking up in other places. And then, drafts from previous drafts, before Dayton and his crew got here. And that was kind of the clubs that Trey had. And it just it never clicked.
Let me interject for a second. Right off the bat, I was there at spring training, that first or second game, one of the early spring training games. Maybe it was his first, maybe it was his second.
It was. Early, I know which one you're talking about, when he had the meeting on the field.
Yeah, it took the team on the field, which a lot of people felt like was kind of Joe College or something like that. When you were looking at that, did you feel like, oh boy?
It was odd. I hadn't seen it before. I can't. Since I never walked in those shoes, it's hard for me to criticize that.
Right.
The only issue I had with it was, and I told him this upstairs later, so I'm not saying something that I, publicly that I didn't say to him. But, this was after a walk-off win in a spring training game. And it was the C gamers. We have the A gamers who started the game, the B gamers who subbed for them, and then the C guys came in later. And, it was whoever hit the walk-off hit. Actually, it might have been one of the big guys. I think Ryan Shealy had something to do with it, but who may have DH'd the whole game or something. But my whole point being is the guys that he was mad at had already dressed and left.
Right.
They'd been out of the game for 3 or 4 innings and everything. And, that's, for my money, if you every day in spring training is a meeting. Every day guys get together. Every day there's a lot of time together as a group. And, if you want to call the band together the next morning and say, hey guys, we need to tighten this up a little bit. We're trying to turn this thing around here. That's fine. It wasn't anything that cost Trey his job by any stretch, but it was something that I hadn't seen before. And, to Trey, there were a couple of things with Trey that I don't think a lot of people understood, good, bad, or indifferent. He had told me once, the criticism, because that move got criticized, as you all know. Some other moves got criticized here locally, and the club wasn't winning, which is just
right.
A bad match when all that's going on. But he made a comment about his work was never this criticized before when he managed over in Japan, or any time he'd ever been a manager. Well, if you think back on his history, he managed the Columbus Clippers, who had these guys named Posada and Jeter and Rivera. How much name dropping? You just list everybody who's in the Hall of Fame. Those guys. So you're not going to get criticized first, and you're in Columbus, so you're really
right.
not going to get criticized a lot there. Then he went to Japan, where it's pretty common.
Teams also.
Yeah, and it's pretty common knowledge in Japan that you just don't criticize the manager. You don't question him. It's just kind of the culture over there. So when he got here and got into a big league clubhouse, big league managerial situation, and things didn't work out on the field that day, people questioned a motive or a move that he might have made or what have you. It started building up on him a little bit, tearing him up a little bit. But again, it just didn't work out. But I've been around this long enough now. I think Ned's my 16th or 17th manager, right. And I think the next one who walks out on his own accord will be the first. Because that's just kind of the way the business is. So you just when it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and they make the next move.
Let's fast forward a little bit. Obviously, it doesn't work out with Trey. Now you're on to Ned Yost coming aboard. Now, Ned came to the organization before he became the manager, and there was some speculation. I don't even know if it was considered a manager in waiting, but it turned out to be that way. When you get to the third manager, although the first one obviously was in place, is that a time when doubt creeps in a little bit, or were you still? Did you have the faith, and had you seen the drafts and everything that you felt like the ball club was still going in the right direction under Dayton?
I had the faith. I mean, I really did, and the only concern I had was only because how bad it ended for Ned in Milwaukee. I mean, that was what just kept coming to my mind.
And for people who don't remember, he got fired right in the middle of the
3 weeks
pennant
to
race.
go. 3 weeks
in
to
the
go in
pennant
the
race.
Season, yeah,
in a pennant race.
In a pennant race, and they ended up,
Making
Dale Swaim, who's now oddly enough his bench coach here. Dale Swaim ended up being the interim manager that took him to the postseason.
Right.
And it was
unprecedented.
It was unprecedented. It was a panic move by the owner. I mean, let's just be honest about it. Somebody panicked in Milwaukee, and Ned was the fall guy. Did Ned help himself with his interactions with the media or whatever? I don't know. I wasn't there. The funny thing about it is I see the Milwaukee guys, Adam McCalvey, who writes for MLB.com, Tom Hardicourt, who writes for Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, or Milwaukee Sentinel. They love Ned. So, where the problem was, I don't know. But, I know Ned referred to himself at times, because we kind of laugh about it now. When somebody questioned him, "Bad Ned" came out, quote unquote, with quotes around the words "Bad Ned."
Right.
And that was my biggest job, was when he got the managerial role, and I had to first of all, he gets the managerial role. There's not going to be a managerial change unless things aren't going well.
Right.
So he comes in, things aren't obviously going well, and I've got to let it breathe. I'm not just going to come in here and say, "Here's how we should do things. Here's how." I just come in and work with him, and we start feeling each other out and realizing that, as time goes on, he realizes I am out for his best interest, not his worst. And all I care about is, him cooperating with our media, him, giving the time that's necessary when it's necessary, and managing this team to victories. That's all that I care about. I mean, I really do. I just want him to be successful, because if he's successful, we're all successful. And that's, to take another Dayton Moore quote, but, all of our successes are tied together. And if Ned's successful and the players are, then this whole organization's having a great time. So as time went on, and you were part of many of them, I mean, did Ned like to spar a little bit? Does he still like to spar a little bit? Yeah, he does.
But probably more at the outset.
More at the outset, because you know what? He was not going to let anybody try to ruin his moment, which was coaching these guys up, managing these guys up to be better baseball players. And, I'll never forget. I mean, there were many a post-game press conference. There still are. But many a post-game press conference in 12 and 13 when he allowed Alcides Escobar to hit in the eighth inning, when Mike Moustakas couldn't, in anybody's mind, couldn't get a big hit when he needed to. And people would ask him after every game. You may have asked him, for all I know, but I know the beat guys did. You had an opportunity to pinch hit for him in the eighth. Why didn't you? And dang it, to Ned's defense on that one, every time he said, "I need him to perform." And right now, what's the difference between us winning 68 games or 72 games?
Right.
we're still not going to be in the race. But when we're winning between 86 and 92 games and we want to win the division and take it on to the next level, I need him to perform. I can't have him looking over his shoulder wondering when I'm going to pinch hit for him. Whoever the player is, whether it's Esky, whether it's Moose, whoever's in the lineup. He says, I can't afford to have that happen. And by golly, he was right.
Yep.
And you know what? He to that end alone, we went from having, we had the national media around us. You were around us every day. We had the national media around us there for such a long stretch. Excuse me. And every day I had to wake up to, how is Alcides Escobar leading off this potential world championship team, this league championship team? How is he? We didn't even have the answers for it.
Right.
The term Esky Magic came down. There was a term in Boston, Manny being Manny. Well, Esky Magic floated here in Kansas City. But a lot of it was just because of the confidence that Ned instilled in him. And those growing pains that we went through in 10, 11, 12, and even 13, though 13, I will not ever consider 13 being a year of growing pains. I'll consider that the year where we said we can compete.
Right.
We didn't at the end, but we let everybody know that, it was time. It was time that you better get better because we're here.
It's often referred to maybe cryptically or, as a mistake or whatever, what was the 2012 our time. Some people might be curious as to how slogans come about, how bold you want to be with a slogan, your involvement in it, or is it a team effort? Did somebody come up with a slogan, everybody thinks it's great, and that was, it was only a reach. It made some sense given the growth of the team, but it didn't work.
No.
And then it becomes a bit of a joke.
Well, it backfired.
Yeah.
It backfired, and admittedly, and to our marketing department's defense, you pay an advertising firm to work their tail off on your behalf. And, a lot of very smart people met in a room about this, and this was the selection they made. And, we did have Hosmer coming up and Moose coming up, and Kane had joined us. We had a core group.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the general consensus was, in that meeting room, in that boardroom, was, okay, it's our time to show. Plus, 2012 was the year we had the All-Star game.
Right.
So it's like we battled our butts off in this town to get the All-Star game back here. David Glass worked so hard to get the All-Star game here in Kansas City. And in our minds, you can't convince us in 2012 that we're not going to compete.
Right.
I mean, in our minds, we're going to camp. We've got the All-Star game coming to town, so we're going to have national attention. Now, if we have a team that's competing, oh, my goodness. So
right.
what do we end up with at the All-Star game? We end up with one guy in the game, and it's Billy Butler.
Right.
And that wasn't the plan. That was not when this was etched out for the All-Star game to be played here. The plan was to have Hosmer, have half the diamond be
right.
Royals. Well, it wasn't the case. And, was it a misguided guess? Probably. But, at the time, it sounded good at the time. And there's a lot of things we say in our lives that it was a good idea at the time.
Right.
But it didn't work out. I know, and I don't think I'm speaking out of school here. Dayton was never comfortable with it because he never wants to put expectations or limitations.
Right.
I mean, that's a big thing with him. I don't want expectations. I just want everybody to bust their tail and be the best they can. And he doesn't want to put limitations on people. Somebody says, do you think this guy can be up in in June? Can this guy be up in August? We're going to let him try. That's the whole goal.
Right.
The questions right now are Brady Singer, Jackson Kowar, Chris Bubich, all these guys, can they win? You know what? We hope so. We hope they all blow past
right.
The timetable that's laid out for them in the minor leagues, and they beat expectations. So he's not ever going to limit anybody's expectations, but you're not going to have any. You're not going to make expectations for somebody and say, on this date you have
right.
to be this good. On 2012 we have to. It's got to be our time. Yeah, there were some other teams in the division that didn't think it was our time yet. And they showed us.
Our profile is with Mike Swanson. We'll continue coming up next, and then we get to the fun part as the Royals become really a unique baseball champion in the modern game, and do it with a swagger and a real endearing quality to some, and at times not so endearing as well, which made it even more fun. More Mike Swanson coming up next. Looking for a truly unique escape?